There we go. All right. So the Torah approach, part number 3. The question is, where did they go? We spoke about, the first question was, what are they? The second question was, how old are they? Now is, where did they go? Meaning this question is only obviously assuming that the bones that were found were indeed dinosaurs, which the Rebbe accepts that could be a pshat. But according to that, the question is, where are these dinosaurs, creatures now? So, this is a question that not only Lahav do we ask, but the scientists, it's a huge question that they have. One of the heavy stuff that they have to talk about. And basically, their accepted general theory is that a sudden catastrophic event, I hear it, no? A sudden catastrophic event sealed their fate. What that was exactly, nobody knows. This is, even the scientists agree that they don't know. And there's a whole bunch of random ideas that the scientists talk about and they suggest. So there's one of the coolest ideas which no scientist actually ever said, but we're going to share a moment an idea that people say. The fancy word for people that study fossils are the bones, are paleontologists or paleontologists. So they have some, since nobody knows what happened, and in their mind it's could have been anything. So we're going to share now one of the craziest ideas that, again, we're going to share now. No one actually says so, and that is as follows: that a paleontologist, Mr. David Wilkinson, and others together with him, tried to calculate how much gas would these dinosaurs have produced when they ate too much shallot. And they speculated that the amount of gas that they gave up would have been enough to affect the global climate. And because of that, people got into the idea that the way they died was by gassing themselves into oblivion. And however, such sites were only blowing hot air. But it's a cool explanation, and it may be better than the other ones that they came up with. But the Kolbanim, again, it's not an official shita amongst the scientists. It's interesting to know that some people might tell you this, you know that it's never happened. They think that it's something random. The most common opinions is that there was an asteroid, meaning something from outer space, a planet or something, somehow entered into our Earth over here and just destroyed everything on this planet that caused the nuclear bomb times a billion, and everything that was here died, and everything disappeared, and that is why they are not here anymore. That's this opinion. Now, if that's true, would there be a sign of this somewhere? Yes, there should be a sign somewhere. But in Itaka, there's a whole bunch of places around the Earth, around our planet, that they claim, oh, that's where it is. The whole bunch is next to Mexico, under the ocean, like a huge crater, which they claim that it is. But every place that they claim that there's a whole bunch of other scientists explaining why that cannot be. So the bottom line is they don't have obviously any strong proof for anything, but these are the theories that they speculate that something catastrophic happened. Now, when we see this, obviously any Yid right away assumes it's connected to the Mabul. As you mentioned last year, Lahavdil, in many other religions, there is a tradition. Over 200 religions, cultures, have this tradition of the concept of the Mabul. By us, it's a very symbol that if we accept that they were dinosaurs, so then we can easily say, the Pasuk clearly says, Vayimach es kol hayikum, Hashem destroyed the entire universe, what was going on the planet, Asher al pnei ha'adama, ve'adam, ad behema, ad remes, v'adeif hashamayim, vayumachu min haaretz. It was all destroyed. Any living things were destroyed. Vayisharach noyach v'asher itei batei. Problem, obviously, with this pshat is that we know that afterwards Hashem told Noach, Mikol achai, mikol basar, shnai mikol, tavi el hateva lehachis itach. You should take from every living thing two into your teva, zachar nekeva yiyu. And when we look into the teva, we know, and none of the pictures ever have a dinosaur on the teva. So we're exactly, if they went on the teva, just like we have lions and camels today, we should have dinosaurs too. And if they're not on the teva, then why not? What happened to them? So that is the big question about, did the dinosaurs come onto the Teva, did they survive on the Teva, or were they not? And if yeah, where are they today? And if not, why not? Wasn't Noach instructed to collect everything and put it into the Teva? So there's a Gemara in Zvachim Kuf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph regarding the aim, which we spoke about in the first year. The aim we mentioned is a huge creature that the Gemara describes, and actually this Gemara, the Gemara we quoted last time, we're going to quote it again now by Kitzer. The Gemara brings the Machlekes Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish regarding a different subject, regarding something else about Kavarim, Tumah V'Tara, whatever it may be. And the Gemara says over there, what's the Sfaras of their Machlekes? The Machlekes is, did the Mabul end up in Eretz Yisrael or not? And Rabbi Yechanan says, yes, the Mabul was the entire world. According to Reish Lakish, there was no Mabul in Eretz Yisrael, which it's very hard to understand exactly, according to Reish Lakish, how that works, because the way we know the Mabul, it was 15 amas above the biggest mountains. So the biggest mountains surrounding Eretz Yisrael were completely submerged over 15 amas of water, and by Eretz Yisrael there was some miraculous barrier that just kept all the water outside of Eretz Yisrael. That could be, but that's like a miracle on top of a miracle. The whole Mabul is miraculous. But this is what Reish Lakish says, that there was no Mabul in Eretz Yisrael. Again, how to explain that al Piteva? I don't know. I don't think there's an explanation. Huh? You want to say Begashmis, it's higher, but the way it says in the pasuk, Chamesh Esrei Amma, higher than the highest mountains. And we say Eretz Yisrael is higher than Kol Ha'arotzis, but you want to say that maybe then physically Eretz Yisrael was actually higher. Today it's not higher. The highest point in the world is not in Eretz Yisrael. We know that. As much as it's higher Beruchnis, Begashmis, to say that it's higher is hard to understand. Maybe things have changed. Maybe because of the Mabul things have changed. It would have changed the opposite. Everything else would have become lower. Would have been higher now because everything was rubbed out. It's hard to. That could be, and I think the Gemara actually suggests that Pshat or Farshim say that. What?
I think that like all the lands were one.
That whole svara is a question if Torah agrees with that or not. That people say that, we don't know if that's true or not. It's a different shir. But Akopanim, this is what Reish Lakish says, that there was no Mabul in Yisrael. Yeah.
Maybe that's why, like in the physical, if we're talking about physically, so being a higher level, maybe because that's the reason why it's a higher level, because mom didn't hit it.
The opinions that say that it's higher is because there are psukim which imply that you have to go up to Eretz Yisrael and go down from Eretz Yisrael. That's where the source saying that it's the highest place. But those words of going up and going down can easily be translated to ruchnis, like you're going up a grade. Sometimes the older grade could be on the lower floor of the building. So going up doesn't necessarily mean physically going up. But this Taich of Reish Lakish, to say that he got it from there, that it's physically higher, I don't remember all the details, what the source for is. But again, this is Begashmis, the simple way of explaining it is that it was another miracle, some kind of invisible barrier for blocking out all the water, which would mean that the people that lived in Eretz Yisrael at the time, seemingly there had to have been people which survived as well, besides Noach, unless you say, I think it actually says that those people died in Eretz Yisrael because of the heaven. Okay, whatever. It's a big sugya, which is not really our topic right now. Point is, according to Reish Lakish, there was no Mabul. Now, based on that, back to our conversation, says the Gemara, Bishlama leman da'amar layorad Mabul Eretz Yisrael. According to the opinion that there was no Mabul in Eretz Yisrael, Hainu dekam rima hasam. The Re'aim. Oh, now we know how he survived. Because the Re'aim obviously could not fit into the Teva. Because we spoke last time how huge it was. It was just itself, it was parsois, it was way more than the measurements of the Teva, which was 300 amas. So obviously couldn't fit inside. So how would it survive? Because again, we said the story with Avodah Melech, the Re'aim obviously survived after the Mabul. So now we know how it survived. It survived because of Eretz Yisrael, and over there, they camped out. But according to the one that says that the Mabul was also in Eretz Yisrael, Rima Heichakam, so where was the aim? He had nowhere to park, and he obviously didn't go into the Teva. And for the Gemara, they brought in little puppy dinosaurs. What do you call a baby dinosaur? Is a word for it? Huh? Yeah, I'm saying, but other animals use a name, like a cub, a puppy, or something. So baby dinosaurs were brought into the Teva, gur, and that's why they're a lot smaller, and they can fit into the Teva, and that answers the question. This is what we said last time. I saw Urzila Derima Basiyim. I saw one of these reims that was 1 day old, and it was like Har Tover, and Har Tover is 40 parsois, and now his neck was 3 parsois, and his head was a parsa and a half. I remember then he stuffed up the yardin with his fresh diaper. So it was huge. That's a lot. This is a baby, even a 1 day old reim is so big, still cannot fit into the table. It's only 300 amas. So the question remains: even a baby can't fit in. So where were they? So, and for the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, Roishai hichnisu lateva. He couldn't fit the entire dinosaur inside the teva. They only stuck his head inside, and this way he was able to survive because his head was not submerged under the water, and it was inside the teva, was able to breathe. Frag the Gemara. We said that even Marbarta the Reisha, just his head was a parso palga. It was a parsa is 2 miles, 1.5 miles. Again, way bigger than the 300 amas of the teva. When it says the tip of his nose, you have like a snorkeling, you have just one little part. The tip of his nose, like the nostrils, maybe they were a bit smaller. They were able to fit into the teva, and he was able to have oxygen breathing from there, and that's how he survived. And that's why we have the aims after the map. Frag the Gemara. What?
Wasn't the like the water like outside like
Well,
boiling hot?
let's see. Let's see what the Gemara says. Frag the Gemara v'hakasagya teva. The teva lifted up off the water as the water fell down. The teva floated. It came higher and higher and higher to the point that was way higher than the re'im. And if it was only a tip into the teva and the rest of it was standing on the ground, it still would have been. It wouldn't have been able to to survive. So the Gemara says, "Amar Reish Lakish karn of kasher b'teva." Reish Lakish says, no, its horns. They tied the horns of the re'im to the teva, and this way, as the teva lifted off the ground with the water, as it went higher and higher, so the re'im came along with it as well. So therefore, it wasn't all the way on the bottom. It survived. It was just floating for those that year, basically that entire year. It floated, and its nose was there, and that's how it survived. It doesn't say how it ate, but maybe it ate fish that would come to its mouth. It doesn't say. Frag the Gemara. Rav Chisda said that the people of Deir Mabul, their sin was connected to hot things, and that is why they were punished with boiling hot water. And if it's boiling hot water, then the Re'im can't survive, because nothing can survive in boiling hot water. So the Gemara responds, V'letaimech, and according to this understanding that right around the Teva there was boiling hot water, how would the teva survive? Boiling hot water would destroy the wood, would destroy any kind of tar, any kind of sealants that Noach used to seal the teva would be destroyed as well. A and B, isn't there a tradition that Oig Melech HaBashan was also right outside the teva, and he was also had to survive the boiling hot water? So how are you going to answer that? Ella, you must say, Nes Nasalahem, Shanitstadanu Bitsidi Ateva. That there was a miracle, and they were cooled off on the side of the teva. The waters right around the teva were cool, cooler at least than everywhere else, to the point that Oig was able to survive, the Re'im was able to survive, and the teva itself was able to survive. According to this pshat, by the way, all the pictures of Noach's teva on the water that people draw, they're missing these two big guests on the side, two Malachei Asheres. You have the Re'im on one side, and I would assume on the other sides, and the Oig on the other side, and they were hanging on for their life that entire year. So that would maybe under the table they were kicking each other or something. Whatever. It's like an interesting thing that no one draws. But Halifin, this is according to the Gemara. According to the Gemara is telling us clearly that the Re'im did survive after the Mabul. So it says now the question remains. So if the Gemara seems to, the way the Gemara is describing it as a physical, real thing, that it's that huge and do all these questions. So where is the Re'im today? So that's a question which I don't have an answer for. Some people might say that the Re'im is hiding somewhere on one of these lost islands, which most people have a hard time with that because with Pashas we would have found it by now. There's explorers exploring all over the world. They probably would have bumped into it by now. So it's hard to say there's a physical Re'im out there somewhere. Or maybe it just died out eventually. Maybe such a huge animal wasn't able to survive, it wasn't able to have enough food, and that's how it doesn't live, which we'll just talk about later, if that's a good answer or not. However, what a lot of people don't realize is that even though we talk about dinosaurs as these huge creatures, really most of the dinosaurs, many of the dinosaurs, I would say most of them, are actually animals that, according to the way the paleontologists or the people who study dinosaurs put them together, they're smaller sized animals. They're smaller sizes of cows, of lions, whatever, regular sizes of regular animals. And those animals, where are they? They should have survived if they existed. Again, most of the bones are from smaller creatures. They should have existed. They could have fit into the teva. And by the way, the Re'im, as much as the Chazal describe how huge it was, even the biggest dinosaurs that they have found are nowhere near as big. They're a lot smaller than that, so they seemingly could have fit into the teva too. So, but definitely there's many, many small dinosaurs that, according to the scientists, and where are all those? Why didn't they survive? What's happening with them? So there's two general answers we can say, that either they were very big, or they were destroyed, they were not born again, and we'll explain what we mean. So first of all, there's an opinion that says that in the past, all the animals were so much bigger than they are today. This is the Even Ezer. The Even Ezer says, "V'yadanu ki ateva gdoila ma'od." It was very, very big. He's basically asking the question, how can all the animals have fit into the teva? There's so many animals out there. The teva was only 300 amas by 50 amas. It's very, very small. And then it's as big as it was, all the animals, going to a zoo, going into places, what do they call it? The bird places, I forgot what the name was. Aviary, not safari, another word for it. Whatever the case, these places we have all these birds and all these animals, there's so many. So how could they fit in the teva? So he says there was huge. The Torah clearly says how many amas. So it says that Even Ezer, Gam Yitochen is Kaimas Noach Doila Mikaimasenu. Ki ha'amoi kimidose. As we know, the real taich of the word amma is actually the size of your middle finger. So it really goes from your elbow to your middle finger, and that's how big an amma is meant to be, from your elbow till the end of your hand. Now, if you happen to be very, very tall and your hands are very long, then your amma is a lot bigger. Says the Even Ezra, it's possible that Noach was huge, and because of that, his amos were huge. So his 300 amos were a lot bigger than our 300 amos, and that is why he was able to handle all of the animals that were there. According to this pshat, the animals were bigger in the past. And then he doesn't address the question. I'm sorry, Noach was bigger in the past. I'm sorry, this doesn't answer the question yet. We'll get it in a moment. But this answers only the question of the Even Ezra, how they all fit into the table. The Ramban, by Oig it's clearly like that, correct. By Oig it's clearly, the Torah says it was his amma, his bed was his size, and he was disproportionate. But here, the Even Ezra is machadish, that maybe by Noach as well. So the Ramban disagrees. The Ramban says, the Ramban Bechlal likes to argue with Even Ezra all the time, and he says, don't be fooled, don't be convinced that there was 300 amos in the size of Noach. And that would answer the question how they all fit. Says the Ramban, She'im Kain, if you're going to say that Noach was that big, all the people, meaning Noach and his family, there were 8 people in the Teva, as we know, Noach and his 3 sons, and his wife and their 3 wives, so there was 8 people, they were also huge. And also says the Ramban, if that would be the case, everything's proportionate. And everything had to be also huge at the same time. So if everything was huge, then the 300 amos of Noach are just like 3 amos of today. 3 amos of today with current animals, and 3 amos of the past with the Noach size animals, the same problem. But here the Ramban, we see he gives a suggestion to say that maybe the past animals were different. At least he acknowledged that they were bigger. He says it's not a good answer because of this problem, but he does suggest that if you want to accept it, I don't mind accepting the concept, but it doesn't answer the question. The concept that it was big and the Noach was bigger and the amos were bigger, I can accept. Doesn't answer the question because that means the animals were big as well. So here we have a svara, which we're going to elaborate a bit more, that maybe the animals in the past were different. The svara to say that they were taka destroyed and they were not born again. Which maybe the svara would be that there was taka no room for them and they were not put on the teva, and that's why they didn't make it. But as we said, the problem with this with Prashos will be that it says in the Torah, we'll get to that soon. But the bigger question is based on a Gemara Yerushalmi, and this question is it's a lashon. When I was preparing the shir, so there's a famous lashon Chassidus which we'll soon quote, which there are certain lashonos that Chassidus brings all the time that people think it's a maimer Chazal. It clearly says in Chazal. The famous example is Simcha Peiratz Geder, that happiness breaks all boundaries. It's such a common saying in Chabad that people think it's probably a Gemara or a Medrash somewhere. But it seems like it's not. The Rebbe Rashab is the one that coined the phrase, and it became so common by us. So there's another famous quote that we're soon going to see, that the source is this Yerushalmi. Yerushalmi means the pasuk from Eiv, Tarkiya, Amid Shchakim, Chazakim, Krimutzak, and he says that when Hashem made out the heaven, the Rakiya, so he made them flat out like a toss, like a long platter or something, like a thin, long platter. Yochel She'inan Brin, something which is long and thin, maybe not so strong. Talmud Leimer, Chazakim, that Hashem created them to be very strong. Then the Yerushalmi continues, Yachol Shehin Nisrapin, maybe they get weakened over time, the sky and everything that goes on there gets weak over time. Talmud Leimer Kiri'im Mutzak, that it's as strong as it always was, and the Yerushalmi adds the words, B'chal Shah V'Shah Nidin Mutzakim. It seems to be stronger, implying that it remains the same strength that it was originally, it never gets weakened. So the Yerushalmi is telling us that the sky was the way that strength that Hashem created it, and never gets weakened. This is a big kasha that people that believe in global warming, that there's actual changes in the universe and the atmosphere. So we have to try to figure out how to reconcile this with this Yerushalmi, which seems to say everything remains as strong as it always was. These things do not get weaker. But this is the lashon of the Yerushalmi. The lashon, what it says in Chassidus and all over Chassidus, many ma'amorim. So this was the ma'amor from the Rebbe. The Rebbe says that we find Shevemeshech Kol Azman Lo Yinaseh Chalishus B'Koichim Shel HaNivroim. We find that throughout the years of creation, all the Nivroim, all the creatures that Hashem created, did not become weaker. And as he writes, Tzvah Hashamayim Kayomim Be'ish, U'Tzvah Ha'aretz Kayomim B'Min, U'Ba'ifin Shem Chazokim Ki B'Yem Yibarem. This is the lashon that's common, often brought down. Tzvah Hashamayim Kayomim Be'ish, U'Tzvah Ha'aretz Kayomim B'Min. What does that mean? It means that Tzvah Ha'aretz, whatever's on our planet, on the earth, everything exists all the time from Hashem created the world until today. Meaning, trees, and animals, insects, birds, all those things exist the entire time. The species remains to exist. There were people then, there are people now. There were trees then, there are trees now. All these things remain, and the Rebbe says, "Chazakim kibiyemi baram," just as strong as they always were. And tzva shamayim, the lashon is kayamim beish. What does ish mean? Ish means it's not when it comes to, let's say, the camels. When we're saying the camels existed from Yeshish's Reberishis until now, it doesn't mean that it's the same camel. It means that there were camels then, and there are camels now, and they're the same camel. They're the descendants of those camels. But when it says tzva shamayim kayamim, kayamim beish means the same sun, the same star, the same moon, all those things that were created then, those things remain the same they were then, the way they are now as well. And the understanding is that Rebbe says, Chazokim kibiyemi baram, that the sun is just as strong as it always was, the moon as strong as it always was, the stars. So those that claim that the sun is soon going to explode and become into, what's it called, a black hole, whatever those things are, a dwarf star, all those things, according to the Chassidus, that's not the way it is.
Other stars can't explode either?
No, none of the tzva shamayim can become weak. They're all kayamim beish. They all remain chazakim kibiyem hibarim. This is what it says in Chassidus, and this is what we believe is the way it is. Scientists seem to suggest that things are different. That's their suggestion. It's not like they can witness these things and see it, even though they claim they witness some of it. But it's a kasha. I don't have the answer to I don't know the science well enough to understand what they're saying, to understand why it's right or wrong. But I'm just this is what it says in Chassidus, and I've been upshut that this is the way it is. That Shva Shamayim, all the stars and all the planets out there, they remain kayam beish kibiyem yibarim. You could argue that even though he says tzva shamayim, and the simple interpretation is what I'm saying right now, and this is the way most people touch it all the time. If the source is Taka the Yerushalmi, which by the way, if anybody finds a better source, I spent a lot of time looking, I couldn't find. In the Yerushalmi, it doesn't really say tzva shamayim. It says the rakia, seemingly focusing only on the sky, the heaven, not so much on whatever is going on inside the heaven. So maybe that's what it means. But the lashon the pastor says tzva shamayim, everything there. But that what? Ish means each individual planet, each individual star, each individual thing that Hashem created in Lamaila remains as is itself. Not like the camel, that the camel itself, the first camel is long dead. It had baby camels, and the generations continue. So the species of the camel continues till today. So this lashon of Chassidus, again, the first part, the tzva shamayim, is not so much our conversation. Our topic is the tzva ha'aretz kayamim b'min. Tzva ha'aretz kayamim b'min means that Hashem makes that every species remains as is, remains forever and ever. The same species remains, which the lashon is chazakim ki b'yemi barum, which also we can ask an obvious question. It's things that are strong as the min is just as strong as it always was. Seemingly, we know that people became weaker. I mean, Chazal tells us you did the sadoros in the past. People could handle fasting more. And it's a famous in Tanya talks about that today people can't fast the way they used to fast. So the species of humans have got weakened over time. So when we say chazakim kibiyem hibara, what does that mean exactly? That they're actually the same strength? I don't have a good answer to that. I've asked the question before. I don't remember a satisfactory answer. But that's already a detail of chazakim kibiyem hibara. But the lashon tzva ha'aretz kayam mimin, that exists. That's a common lashon. So now back to the question before: if the dinosaurs taka existed, so l'chayra, how can it be that they didn't come onto the teva? How can the Re'im have disappeared? Seemingly, so this question is a question. Let's say they were on the teva somehow. They were put on the teva. If we can assume that the Re'im was on the teva, so if they were under other dinosaurs, if they were, they maybe made it onto the teva as well. So we have a rule. It has to remain forever. So where are they today? Another question on the subject of Kayam and Bimin is that we do find species that are known to have gone extinct. There's mammoths, and then there's what's it called? The dodo bird. These are two of the most famous ones that most people have heard about them, and they seem to have found strong evidence that these things actually existed. And l'chayra, these minim are not around anymore. So the question is, how can you say Kayam and Bimin? So these are two of the famous ones, but really there's a whole bunch of other ones, many species that scientists and even something fairly recently have been documented to disappear. So there's a svara to say like this. The svara was brought down in the Haris Ubiyurim in Al-Atayr a number of years ago. Somebody wrote an answer. Maybe we can say that it doesn't mean that each species won't disappear. Rather, it means shalin nisbatel min hachai. We're talking about that's cham. We're saying at minat tzimeyach, there's always going to be things growing. This tree, that bush, that grass. No, that could be different. That could go extinct. If no one replants this tree, it's never coming again. If you kill this turtle, you kill that dodo bird or whatever. That's never going to come back. There's no guarantee. We mean that klal the sachai, there's going to always be living things out there. While the mini pratim, individual species, they maybe can be destroyed. That could be destroyed. This was a svara somebody wrote in the Oris of Biyurim, that maybe we can answer the question. That's how some species have gone extinct. That was he asked the question, he gave the answer. So somebody else responded, actually one of my old teachers, Rabbi Cooperman from Kiryat Gat at the time, I don't know if he's still there. He responded that's not a good answer, because there's a maimer of the Rebbe Rashab in Tafresh Memches, where he clearly writes not so. He writes, Afilu min echad prati mimin hanivroim, anuroyim shalayikra la'olam sheyufsad. Even one individual individual species of any spot in Nivroim, we see, says the Rebbe Rashab, that they're never going to be destroyed, they're never going to go extinct. So the Rebbe Rashab's words, these are hard words to explain. What do you mean? It's seemingly very, very well documented, and these are all pictures of different species that are claimed to be documented that existed and no longer exist. So what's the pshat? How can the Rebbe Rashab say it? And this question, back to the dinosaurs and everything else, is it possible, it's like a same category, is it possible for animals to actually go extinct? Seemingly it's for sure documented, and seemingly Chassidus says not so. How can we explain it? And again, back to the original question that the Torah says, mikol hachai. The words mikol hachai seem to apply every last animal was brought into the teva. So to say that the dinosaurs were not brought into the teva, like we suggested, that's l'chayda shvacha answer. So the question remains: what happened to these dinosaurs if they were indeed that we're going now according to the shita that these bones are indeed many types of dinosaurs? Where are they? What happened today? Were they on the teva? Did they survive or not? To strengthen the question even more and lead up to the answer, so there's a Ramban. The Ramban writes, when it says Mikol Achai Mikol Basar, this is the Ramban we quoted before about how can all the animals fit into the Teva, and he said Ibn Ezra's answer doesn't make sense, doesn't help us, because if it was big, then everyone was big. So he writes, Yedua ki achais rabis ma'oid. There's many animals, and some of them are huge. Kepilim, varim eimim, v'zulosam. It's interesting that he mentions pilim, even though the Gemara addressed that. But he says you have these elephants, and you have the eimim, in other words. The haremes, haremes, halorets, ravmoid, and insects. There's millions of insects out there, different types. Game eifa shamayim, mini rab mela mispar. There's birds, there's tons of birds. Ukmeish amar Rabbi Seinu, meyo ve'esri mine eifais tmein yesh b'mizrach. There are 120 types of species of non-kosher birds in the east. V'kulam min ayah, they're all subspecies of the ayah. The ayah is one of the 24 birds that Torah mentions which are not kosher. This is all, and that itself has 120 species. There's no number to how many kosher birds are there out there. So taking each one of them and a pair of each one into the teva seems to be no way it could fit. How's that possible? The Ramban says, if you want to bring all of them, you have to bring all of these animals, each species, each a sachar and a keva. And then you take in consideration the food that they need for an entire year in the teva. This teva won't be enough to contain them. But another 10 tevas also not. There's so many animals in the world, so many different types. So Mamela says that Ramban, there's no way al piteva that everything could fit into the teva. The Ramban says that must have been a miracle. To make the question even stronger, there's a Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. The Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer gives us an inside view what was going on in the teva. Everybody knows from Cheder that the teva had 3 floors. The bottom floor was meant for the garbage, the middle floor was meant for the animals, and the top floor was meant for the people. Now, according to that pshat that we all learned from Rashi, well, that makes the question so much greater. Only one floor, all the animals, birds, insects, everything was on the middle floor. So that's a tough one. But the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer makes it even more complicated because he actually breaks it up differently. This is something which most of you probably never heard before. He says, "Mother kol behema v'chaya biyatzia tachtin." So the bottom floor was for the behemoths and chayas. All the 4-legged animals were on the bottom floor. Mother l'chol ha'oifos, all the birds biyatzia shnia were on the second floor. Mother shkatzim uramasim ubnei adam, all the insects and the rodents, biyatzia shlishis, and the humans were on the top floor. And then he says, Mikana talomid, now you know how many types of birds there are. So it says, Shleishim v'shtayim, the older Mefarshim say it's a mistake. It has to be 365. 365 types of birds. Vishin samachem min yishkotsim baris, 365 types of rodents. V'chein beyitzia tachtoina, v'chein beyitzia shnia, v'chein b'mayil shlish. Number tachtim, shnim, shlim tasel. So really, I skipped the part where he brings actually the lashon of it, describing how big was each cage for each of the animals, and he makes the calculation 300 amas, 50 amas, 3 amas tall, and he makes the calculation. He comes out that how the size of each cage, there were 365 cages. So that's basically the entire amount you had. That's all you had inside the teva. 365 times 3, and the bottom was only animals, so the question is even stronger. Look, the Raman just told us 120 birds just from the min ayah. So what in the world is going on over here? How did everything fit into the teva? So the Raman said a miracle. Okay, once it's a miracle, there's no questions. The Ibisha can do anything. But there is an answer that's brought down, a very geschmacke answer, which this answer will answer the question that we're asking now. How did everything fit into the teva? And maybe it can also be an answer to what happened to the other dinosaurs. The Radal, the Chidush Radal, Rab David Luri on Pirkei Rab Eliezer, he writes like this. He says, Shalit Ba'ilam Yedea Bebruav, the Eibishter that rules the world knows his creations. Tziva Noach, he told Noach, when he told Noach to build the teva and bring the animals, Lakachas Oison Haminim Haroshiyim, to take the top species, the first original species, Shagoli V'yadua Lefanav Yisbarach, that the Eibishter knows, Sheish Minetzer Shorshein, when they're going to reproduce, Kshiafutzu Apnei Tevel, Yachzeru V'yipardu L'kol Aminin Harabim, Shanarei Maisan Lefanein. What does this mean? So here's a picture over here of all the different types of dogs. The dogs are all considered the family of dogs. Scientists study animals and they realize that a lot of dogs are really, even though they look very different, they really have similar DNA, a chromosome, whatever it's called, and they have similar species, and they always try to figure out what's the original dog. And they got to the maskana, the original dog is really a gray wolf. That's the ancestor, so to speak, of all the other dogs out there. So it's really one wolf, one zachar, one akeva. They reproduced, and over time, all the other animals came. And by the way, this is in many animals. There's many animals that they go through as sheep. What's the original sheep? There's hundreds of breeds of sheep and cows and all these different types. But here they have, it's basically, we mentioned before, the ayah, 120 subspecies of ayah. So the Raman says 120, the Radal will tell you, yeah, 120. They all come from the original ayah. There was one ayah, one bird ayah, that had a male, female, and their descendants, their little baby birds, over time, traveled to different places. They got suntans, they got affected by the environment where they were, and slowly they had different features. They got different colored feathers, they got different sized wings, whatever the location where they were affected them, and that's how they slowly evolved, that they're looking slightly different, and they became subspecies, but really they come from the same place. So according to the Radal, this Radal is basically telling us that now we can answer the question, how can everything fit into the Teva? He says, yes, there's millions of animals, but really, if you take the original, the first species animal of each one of them, it's not so much. They were on the beginning. Hashem didn't create on the first day millions of animals. Hashem created on the first day only 365, according to Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. He created only that amount of birds, that amount of animals, insects, and they, over time, they ended up evolving to different places. And then when Hashem told Noach, he can't get the animals into the teva, so Noach was not going to go every single pair. Hashem said, no, every single animal. Hashem says, you go around and I'll tell you which ones are the original dog, what's the original lion, what's the original cow. You'll get all of those. And Remela, it'll all fit into the teva because it's not as big, it's not as much as you think. And those original ones will reproduce eventually and come back before. Now, the Radal suggests something over here, which I will take the liberty to maybe disagree with. The Radal was one of the Mefarshim. We lived in times at the Samach Tzedek and the Rebbe Marash. So, of course, usually I would have the chutzpah to argue with, but it comes to dogs, maybe I can have a little bit of opinion. That the Radal says that basically Noach had in front of him a whole world with a whole bunch of different species. Hashem wanted them all to come back. I want to suggest, as we'll see more pratim soon, that maybe not. Maybe I like his prat very much, but maybe Taka. Maybe the animals, the way they developed before the Mabul, didn't develop the same. Just like it's understood that all the ones that are developed now, again, if we go according to this opinion of the scientists, and they all come from the same gray wolf, it was obviously over a long time that they developed differently, but there's a lot of the different factors where they are. And if those factors change slightly, then the development would be different. So maybe before the Teva, before the Mabul, they developed one way, and now they develop differently. So the Mele, just that's saying that we'll get to more pratim in a little bit. So the answer would be This answers the two questions. How did he fit everything into the teva? Because he just took the original ones, and the main minim did not get destroyed. The original species of each one of them didn't get destroyed, and that answers the other question we asked: what happened to the dodo bird? What happened to the woolly mammoth? Well, the mammoth we would all understand is in the family of elephants. We would understand that the dodo bird is part of other parrots or stuff like that. So those definitely still exist. So when the Rebbe Rashab said that the min remains, the species remains, he doesn't mean every single species remains. I mean, if you have, let's say, if you crossbreed two different colored snakes, for example, you'll get a new pattern snake. Then you kill that snake. That's it. That mean is over. A different pattern doesn't mean it's a whole new species. So similarly, we can say that even though the pashtus will look at the woolly mammoth as different than the elephant, really the original species that Hashem created, according to this pshat, those remain. That species remains. Whether it's in the shape of a woolly mammoth, in the shape of an elephant, it's still there. And the dodo bird as well. Whatever original bird it came from still exists. So B'meila, that would be, I think, a very nice answer that will tell us that tzva shamayim kayam tzva haaretz kayamim b'min, the species, each individual, each main species remains. So you can kill, now take all the certain types of dogs and kill them. It won't be a contradiction because there's still other types of dogs and other wolves, and these things are still from that original thing. And this will lead.
Clearly mentioned that every subspecies.
He said every min within min achai. Mean within mina, when he says Kamosha, we see within the minachai. So I'm telling you, I'm giving you an example. If you get an albino squirrel and you kill it, so that's no more albino squirrels anymore. I mean, it's obviously it's not considered a separate species, which is a big shaila bichlal that I haven't had a clarkite. And how do you decide what's a subspecies and what's considered part of the same species? Like who decides if it's slowly but surely, like amongst people? Yeah, are black people and white people two subspecies of the same category of Homo sapiens, or are we considered all the same species? I wonder. I wonder how do you decide? Our chromosomes are the same. Our DNA is the same. I mean. That's Asians, Mexicans, whatever. There are certain people that have like they have different, they have very different ways of life. Different, their lifespan is different. Their hair is different. Yeah, you never see a Schwarzer Gingy, right? It's black with red hair. Why not? Obviously, they're different, and you never see a black with straight hair. It's always curly hair. Whatever. It's not never, but the concept is there. So I would suggest that when it says the Rebbe Rashab is saying the min didn't start, the min wasn't destroyed. It means the min. It means the main min of that. But there's the cousins, the other ones that developed over time. They were never the original min, and therefore the original min is still around, and you can still find the original min. So that is, and by the way, when it comes to cows, those that live in Postville, we have a half hour away from here. There's a place which they claim that they have the original cows, like white cows with huge horns. They claim that's the original type of cows that it was. That's the bubby of all the cows, whatever. So
They only have one?
there's a herd of them. I haven't been there in a long time, but I remember it was a few years ago. It's next to Sea Savers Exchange, whatever, next to the Torah, 40 minutes away. It's a nice place, but
What's it called?
Sea Savers Exchange, right next to it. Oh, what's the cow call you're asking?
No, like the place.
Must I Sea Savers? It's not. It's nothing to do. It's boring. It's not. I mean, if you want to see the cow, that may be interesting, but whatever. Akopani. So that could be an answer, and this will lead us to try to answer about the dinosaurs as well. Maybe before the Mabul, it developed different. Maybe the animals developed in such a way that they developed into dinosaurs. Again, as we pointed out in the first year, that the bones, the way they put the bones together, they're imagining bones to be put together, which should make sense to them based on what they currently observe, what they can imagine. But maybe before the Mabul, all these animals developed differently, and that's why the bones that they see today are different bones than was in the past. Because just like today, if you take different species of dog bones, they won't fit together. Each one makes its own little small skeleton. So maybe then they develop differently. Maybe, I don't know exactly where they came from which animal they came from, but maybe the taka were developed differently. And those animals, the ones that turned into dinosaurs, the bones that we don't have anymore, were all destroyed before the Mabul. And the original ones, which were the regular animals we have today, were put onto the Teva. And like I said before, the Radal says they all reproduced and redeveloped the same way, but maybe not. The Radal, I'm saying that there's no reason to say that. We could say no, they developed differently, and that's why we don't have those shaped animals today, because the way the animals developed over time didn't. To strengthen this whole svara, there's another interesting medrash we can add to the conversation. The Bereshis Rabbah says, Rabbi Azariah b'shem Rabbi Yehuda bar Simon Amar Hakil Kilkulu Ma'asein b'dei Mabul. Before the Mabul, everybody, all the animals misbehaved. Everyone was doing bad stuff. Hakelev hayahelech etzel hazeiv. The dog went to the wolf. Now, according to this medrash, the dog and the wolf are not related, and that's the way it seems to be shot. A rooster went to a tavas. What's a tavas? A dog. Isn't there a peacock? Tabas, I think, is a peacock. Whatever, a different type of bird. Hadao dichsiv ki hishchis kol basar. Hishchis kol adam enks. It doesn't say all the people were misbehaving. We're not sneezing. Ela hishchis kol basar. Oh, so now we see that before the Mabul, this was something which happened all the time. That all the animals. Today, we'll talk about this in a bit. Today, we know that there's something called a liger. A liger means when a lion marries a tiger, they're going to have the baby that gets born is called a liger, which is like a breed that has some of the patterns of both of the lion and the tiger. However, these things rarely happen in the wild, meaning it could happen naturally. Usually, people in the zoos will try to make it purposely, but it doesn't happen all the time. You don't see ligers all over the place. Mashenkin, by before the Mabul, it seems like they were doing it all the time. Animals were kihishchis kol basar. And as a result, they developed even different. Today it doesn't happen. You don't have you don't have this thing. So this medrash will support what we're saying, that it was even worse than today, in meaning the crossbreeding, and that's why they developed so in the wild. Naturally, they did the crossbreeds today. A lot of farmers will crossbreed cows and sheep because they want to develop a certain type of species. But that has to be there's a specific goal what they're trying to get. They want to get, let's say, the milk. Let's say a cow that gives a lot of milk, and another cow, let's say, has a high protein level. Let's try to combine the two to get a cow that has a lot of milk and a lot of high protein. So they're doing it purposely with a special kavanah. But maybe before the Mabul, since it was just wild animals being basically not sneezed without any cheshbonis, so maybe Taka developed completely different. And strength is as far that we said that maybe Taka, those animals developed somehow into the bones which are not considered dinosaur bones.
Well, most of the time these half-breeds don't have kids.
Oh, so we'll get to that in a bit. Kihishchis called, and Gemara Sanhedrin says the same thing. Hishchis kol basar is darkei la'aretz. He says, Amar Rabbi Yechim Melamed she'irbiu behema al chaya v'chaya al behema v'akoil al adam v'adam al akol. Everyone was misbehaving. There was a complete mess up of all these things, and seemingly, and as I'm answering your question, but see in a moment, seemingly they all reproduced in different kind of ways, and that's why things that today we don't have anymore existed then. And one more source before we get to the part that says a little kasha to what I'm saying till now is Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer says, "Ad shaloima leiba amabul hayu atmeid merubim min atahorin." Today, if you go into the wild, go to the Kluger, what's it called? The Kruger Park. Kruger's here. Kruger Park, and in Africa, you're going to see a lot more kosher animals than not kosher animals. You have the wild beasts, you have the deer, gazelle, you have all these things that are basically kosher animals, and you'll see a few lions here, a few elephants there, but the vast majority of the animals in the wild are definitely kosher animals. Similarly, in captivity, for sure like that. I mean, you have chazedim. In Iowa, we have spoke about in the Chazashir how many we have, but it's understood that cows and goats and sheep and so many more. Then you have dogs, even though almost every American family has one dog, but one farmer in Iowa has 10,000 cows. That already knocks out everything else. So you have all these cows and all these sheep and all these goats. There's so many more kosher animals than there were. Says that because in the past it wasn't like that. There were many, many more non-kosher than kosher. Oh, so that means things develop differently. Again, that supports this svara that we're saying. But here's the question that Rosh Simcha mentioned. Amr Rabbi Shua ben Levi, la'olam emi saberes leitmeya min atahir v'leitahira min atamei. A non-kosher animal and a kosher animal that cohabitate, they are not going to reproduce, whether the zachar is the kosher, whether the zachar is the not kosher. V'leigasa min adaka v'leidaka min agasa. And also you can't have a cow and a goat reproducing, or whatever, the same as zachar and a keva. And you can't have a behema from a chaya either. Meaning you can't have a domesticated animal reproducing with a non-domesticated animal, and therefore this whole svara that I'm saying now becomes weaker. It doesn't completely destroy it, because we see that lions and tigers, they're both chayas, they're both dakas, they're both tmeim, and we see that they reproduce. So you have situations where you could crossbreed things that are somewhat connected to one another. It doesn't say two species can't crossbreed. It says there's a few conditions of it. It's basically two conditions: tmei and tahira, and gasa and daka, three, and chaya and behema. So those three conditions, if they're met, if it's two temeim animals, or two tahirim animals, two gasas, two dakas, two chayas, two behemas, then already the rule could apply. Of course, it makes it a lot less than it was before, but there is another opinion over here. Rabbi Eliezer Chaya misaberes mi behema. So he says no. A chaya, a non-domesticated animal, could become pregnant from a domesticated animal, so it's possible. So, what? That's a liger. That's a liger, as the mane of a lion, and as the stripes of a tiger.
So this can have a kid?
This cannot reproduce. As far as we know, ligers, anything which is a crossbreed cannot reproduce.
What about with another liger?
I don't think so. I think even then they can't.
This is a real thing.
like a mule. These are, yeah, I think that most of the pictures are obviously fake, but I think this one is actually real. There's definitely a concept of a liger. It could be this picture is not a real one, but there's definitely a concept. There might be pictures of ligers. I think some zoos have them also. The point is, according to Rabbi Eliezer, it was possible. Maybe we can say it's not really a machlekes b'metzias. Maybe before the Mabul, after the Mabul. Maybe before the Mabul, so many things have changed after the Mabul. Maybe this was another difference that Hashem did. Hashem made this rule that from now on, these animals cannot reproduce from each other. I don't really have to say that, meaning my general svara that I'm sharing, that I'm suggesting that there was so much more natural crossbreeding amongst the animals in the wild, which developed in the way of the dinosaurs, maybe, I can still say that. But if I want to argue that Rabbi Eliezer is right before the Mabul and there was more ways of cohabitating, that makes it the possibilities even greater, because you can crossbreed other ones and they can become pregnant that have even more different types of creatures, and this would answer where the dinosaurs were. So that is basically the answer. So to summarize what we said, where are they today? So one svara which was based off what the Ramban said, that maybe the same animals are just in small, so the bones, but it's not such a good answer, because it's not like pshat that the dinosaur bones are like a similar, like a huge, a huge cow or something, a huge horse. It's obviously completely different shape, so it's not such a good answer. But again, if we say that they're putting the bones in the wrong kind of way, maybe it could be a good answer. Second answer that we're suggesting is that it did not evolve again, meaning that that's the main answer I'm trying to share. That maybe the taka didn't happen again, and then of course, not to forget what we said l'chatchila, maybe not in the first place, but the aim remains to be a strong question, because the reason why the aim is the strongest question, because the Chazal Gemara clearly says all the details how it survived, and we say that Kayamim Bimin has to remain the species. So the question of the Rebbe Rashabes, so what happened to the aim? The aim, you can't say that there's another type of aim out there, unless you want to say that the elephant's a type of the aim. It's hard to say that the size of the aim and the size of the elephant. Huh? If it existed, the Begashim is L'choras exists today. That's a big question. So you want to say it exists like that? But if we assume that the scientists are right that it doesn't exist today, which I mean most regular people will have to agree with that, even though there's no chayv, just because the world says we don't have to accept it. But regular seichel would accept that their aim is not around today, and therefore, so say that a subspecies of their aim is still around. What subspecies would that be? Again, an elephant is smaller than it's not miles long. So,
Maybe the same, like, for an example, like the Leviathan, like everyone, it says everywhere the chef, you can have Leviathan, the biggest fish, and these days no one could see the.
in the Leviathan, it's a lot easier to say that they can't find it. The ocean hasn't been explored. They've explored more in outer space than they've explored in the ocean. There's a lot more in the ocean that has not been explored. So the pashtus, it's hard to say that it exists there also somewhere, because seemingly they would have noticed it. But there's so much of the ocean that wasn't explored that it's a lot easier. It's more comfortable to tell a scientist that there's maybe a Leviathan now down there somewhere that we didn't see, than that there's an aim out there somewhere which we didn't see. Just a harder answer to say.
It could just be like a massive plot of land. Could be like people built on it.
Again?
If it's miles long, could be people built on it, like it's land.
Oh, did it aim?
Yeah.
Like the Gemara, Rabbi Chana says over there that there was a